The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy of trees as Sergeant Liam Hart moved cautiously through the dense forest. His canine companion, Rex, a highly trained German shepherd, was ahead, sniffing the cold air. Suddenly, Rex halted, his ears perked up. Liam, ever the disciplined soldier, stopped immediately, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. A low growl rumbled in Rex's throat. "What is it, boy?" Liam muttered under his breath. The dog darted forward, nose to the ground, pulling on the leash with a sense of urgency. Liam followed quickly, his heart rate picking up, the hairs on the back of his neck standing. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees, gnarled and twisted, seemed to close in around them. The faint sound of something, or someone, breathing heavily, reached Liam's ears. There it was. A small, huddled figure in the clearing ahead. A child, alone. Liam's heart skipped a beat as he approached, the adrenaline surging through him. His mind raced. What was a child doing out here in the wilderness, in the middle of the night, especially one so small, so vulnerable? The moonlight barely pierced through the thick canopy of trees as Sergeant Liam Hart moved cautiously through the dense forest. His canine companion, Rex, a highly trained German shepherd, was ahead, sniffing the cold air. The crunch of dry leaves beneath their boots was the only sound that broke the silence. It had been a rough few days of patrol, searching for remnants of a rogue militia that had been causing chaos in the region. Exhausted, Liam wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling the weight of his gear, but his focus remained sharp. Rex's keen senses kept them both alert. Suddenly, Rex halted, his ears perked up. Liam, ever the disciplined soldier, stopped immediately, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. A low growl rumbled in Rex's throat. "What is it, boy?" Liam muttered under his breath. The dog darted forward, nose to the ground, pulling on the leash with a sense of urgency. Liam followed quickly, his heart rate picking up, the hairs on the back of his neck standing. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees, gnarled and twisted, seemed to close in around them. The faint sound of something, or someone, breathing heavily reached Liam's ears. There it was, a small, huddled figure in the clearing ahead. A child, alone. Liam's heart skipped a beat as he approached, the adrenaline surging through him. His mind raced. What was a child doing out here in the wilderness, in the middle of the night, especially one so small, so vulnerable? Rex, sensing the child's distress, barked and ran forward, wagging his tail in an uncharacteristic manner, trying to comfort her. The girl, no older than 7, sat on the ground, her clothes torn, hair matted with dirt, her eyes, wide with fear, locked onto Liam's, then flickered to Rex. The connection was immediate. "Are you okay, little one?" Liam asked softly, kneeling down in front of her, trying to keep his voice calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. The girl's lips trembled. "Mum," she whispered hoarsely, looking down at the ground. Liam frowned, glancing back at Rex, who whined softly, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. There was something off about this. The girl didn't seem to belong here. Liam reached out carefully, offering his hand. "Where's your family, sweetheart? What happened?" The girl flinched at first, but then, as if the weight of her words crushed her, she whispered again, her voice breaking. They left me here." Liam's blood ran cold. Left? Abandoned? Out here, in the middle of nowhere? The child curled into a ball, wrapping her arms around her knees. The distress on her face was undeniable. Rex stepped forward and gently nuzzled her hand, trying to comfort her. Liam's military training kicked in. He was a soldier, after all. But this was different. This wasn't a mission. This wasn't a battle. This was something far more personal, far more painful. He glanced around, trying to piece together the situation. Was this a trap? A sick joke? His mind was racing, but Rex's unwavering loyalty and the terrified child in front of him made his decision clear. "Okay, listen to me," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You're safe now. I won't leave you here. We'll get you out of this. But you need to tell me what happened. Who left you here?" The girl looked up at him, eyes filled with confusion and hurt. She didn't speak. Instead, she clutched something close to her chest. Liam leaned in, his heart aching for the tiny, fragile soul in front of him. Without warning, Rex suddenly barked, a deep, guttural bark that made Liam snap his head up. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Liam's instincts kicked into overdrive, scanning the shadows in the forest around him. Rex was on high alert, and Liam wasn't about to ignore the dog's warning. Before he could act, the silence was shattered. A noise, faint but unmistakable, reached his ears. Footsteps, rapid and coming closer. Liam's fingers tightened around the rifle, his heart pounding harder than ever. But the girl, she was his priority. Whatever was coming, whatever danger lurked, it couldn't matter. He had a mission: protect this child. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, harsh and menacing. "You won't get away with this, soldier," the voice sneered. Liam's blood ran cold as he turned to face the source. The voice lingered in the cold air, an ominous warning that sent a chill down Liam's spine. Rex growled again, his fur bristling, his body tense as he stood protectively in front of the girl. Liam instinctively moved closer, positioning himself between her and the growing threat in the woods. His hands tightened around his rifle, the cold metal feeling like a second skin, but his thoughts were focused on the child. "Stay behind me," Liam whispered urgently, trying to keep his voice low yet firm. "No matter what happens, stay quiet and stay down." The girl, barely able to comprehend the gravity of the situation, nodded, her wide eyes locked on Liam. She clutched a small bundle in her arms, trembling as if the weight of the world had fallen on her tiny shoulders. But it wasn't just fear. There was a deep sadness, a loss that was far too heavy for someone so young to bear. Liam's mind raced. Whoever was out there wasn't just a threat to him. They were after the girl. And that meant trouble. The kind of trouble that would escalate quickly if he didn't act. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The enemy was moving fast, with purpose. Whoever they weren't ordinary. They were organized, dangerous. "Rex!" Liam hissed under his breath. "Track them." "Stay low." The dog's ears perked at the command, and without a moment's hesitation, Rex bounded forward, his body blending into the shadows of the forest. Liam moved quickly, positioning himself strategically while keeping the girl hidden behind a thick tree trunk. His heart hammered in his chest, not just because of the approaching threat, but because he was now responsible for more than just himself. His mind briefly flashed back to the war zones he had left behind, scenes of chaos, explosions, and gunfire, but none of that mattered now. This was something different, something personal. The girl's life depended on him. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence. Rex had picked up the trail. Liam didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, pushing through the dense underbrush, but his movements were calculated. He had to be quiet. No sudden movements. Every second counted. The sound of footsteps was now unmistakable, closing in on their position. The shadows seemed to stretch longer as the darkness of the forest grew thicker around them. Liam could hear his own breath, ragged and shallow, but he fought to keep calm. He couldn't let the girl see him falter. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw them. Figures moving stealthily between the trees, just beyond the edge of the clearing. 2 men, dark clothes, armed. They were searching for something or someone. Liam's pulse quickened. These weren't just ordinary hunters. This was a team, and they were after the girl. "Stay low," he ordered softly, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The girl was trembling beneath his command, but she did as she was told. She crouched down behind the thick tree, her eyes wide with fear, her breath coming out in quick bursts. Liam's mind was racing. He had 2 choices: engage them now and risk the girl's safety, or wait for an opening. The men were getting closer. Too close. Liam's grip on his rifle tightened, and he slowly raised it, positioning himself to fire if necessary. His instincts screamed at him to act fast. But then, something changed. Rex's sharp bark echoed through the woods, followed by the sound of claws scraping against bark as the dog launched himself at the men. The first assailant didn't have time to react. Rex knocked him to the ground with force, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's arm. The second attacker spun around, drawing a knife, but Rex was already on him, too fast. He had no chance. The chaos of the sudden attack was the opening Liam needed. He moved quickly, stepping into the clearing, his rifle at the ready. "Don't move!" Liam shouted, his voice deep and commanding. The second man froze. The knife lowered slightly, but his eyes were full of defiance, rage. He wasn't afraid. "Not so fast," Liam warned, taking another step forward, his rifle aimed directly at the man's chest. "Who are you?" the man growled, his voice filled with venom. "What do you want with her?" Liam didn't answer. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. The girl was safe for now, but it wasn't over. The situation was far from resolved. These men were here for a reason. They weren't just looking for a lost child. There was something else. "We don't want any trouble," the man said, trying to sound calm, though his nervousness was evident. "We just need the girl. Let us take her. We can all walk away." Liam's grip on his rifle tightened. He had no intention of letting these men take her. She wasn't just a girl to him now. She was a responsibility, a life he was sworn to protect. Rex growled fiercely, his teeth bared as he stood guard over the fallen attacker. The message was clear. Nobody was taking this child from them. "I said, get back," Liam repeated, his voice colder this time. The man looked over his shoulder, considering his options, but it was clear he wasn't ready to back down. Instead, his hand moved toward his waistband. Liam's heart skipped a beat. It was too quick, too dangerous. In one fluid motion, Liam fired. The shot rang out, loud and deafening, cutting through the night air. The man dropped to his knees, his hand clutching his side as he gasped in pain. The other attacker, immobilized by Rex's bite, let out a muffled shout, but didn't move. Liam didn't wait to see if the man would recover. He dashed toward the girl, pulling her up gently by the arm. "We have to go, now," Liam ordered. Liam's heart raced as he pulled the girl to her feet, her small frame trembling with fear. She clung to his side, her eyes wide with confusion, but there was no time for explanations. They had to move fast. Rex, still guarding the injured man, growled menacingly as Liam ushered the girl into the deeper shadows of the forest. "We're not safe yet," Liam murmured, his voice low but steady. He glanced back over his shoulder, watching the two men who had dared to attack them. The one he had shot was still writhing on the ground, clutching his side, while Rex stood vigil over the other, his body tense and ready to strike at any moment. Liam turned and began to lead the girl through the trees, keeping to the dense underbrush as much as possible. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the thick carpet of leaves and moss underfoot, but every crack of a twig, every gust of wind that rustled through the leaves, made Liam's senses flare to life. He was a soldier trained to anticipate danger at every corner, to read the environment like a second skin. But in this moment, with a child depending on him and a loyal dog by his side, his instincts were sharper than ever before. He couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. This wasn't just another mission. This wasn't just a mission of survival. This was personal. The girl, this child who had been abandoned in the forest, needed him. She was his responsibility now. "What's your name?" Liam asked, glancing down at the little girl walking beside him. Her small hand was still clutching his jacket tightly, as if the fabric was her only lifeline in this terrifying world. The girl didn't answer right away. She looked up at him, eyes full of confusion and sorrow, as though she wasn't sure she could trust him completely yet. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Lena," she said, her words quivering. "Lena," Liam repeated softly, trying to steady his breath. "Okay, Lena. I'm Sergeant Liam Hart, and this is Rex. We'll get you out of here, all right? Just stick close to us." Lena nodded but said nothing more, her small frame hidden behind Liam's larger one as they moved through the forest. But as they continued to move, a sudden shift in the air caused Liam to stop dead in his tracks. Rex, ever the loyal companion, halted beside him, his ears perked, his nose twitching as if detecting something. The forest, which had once been so eerily quiet, now seemed to hum with a distant, subtle tension. Liam squinted into the darkness ahead, but there was no sign of movement, no new threats. "Stay down," Liam whispered urgently, his hand instinctively gripping the rifle tighter. He motioned for Lena to crouch behind him. She obeyed, trembling, her face pale in the moonlight. Liam took a deep breath, his mind racing. Something wasn't right. He had no concrete evidence to go on, but his gut was telling him they were being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and his fingers tightened on the rifle. Rex growled low, the warning deep in his throat, but Liam's instincts kicked in. He needed to stay alert. He scanned the forest again, his eyes darting over the dense trees, searching for any sign of movement, any glint of metal, anything that would reveal their pursuers. But the forest remained still, like an ominous void, swallowing all sound. "I don't like this," Liam muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. Without warning, a faint crack of a branch, broke the silence. Liam's heart skipped a beat. It was so quiet at first that he almost dismissed it, but then came another sound, clearer this time, footsteps, moving swiftly and silently in their direction. "Shit," Liam hissed. The girl, clutching her knees to her chest, whimpered in fear. Liam could hear her heartbeat, thudding in the silence of the night. "Stay close," Liam whispered again, his voice barely audible as he pushed Lena back into the shadows, urging her to remain as still as possible. Rex, still alert, turned his head toward the sound, his body coiled like a spring, waiting for the signal. Liam kept his eyes locked on the source of the sound, his breath steady but quick. The footsteps were getting closer. He could make out the silhouettes of figures moving between the trees. "There's more of them," Liam muttered. He quickly scanned the area, his military training kicking in. If they were surrounded, there was only one thing to do: escape. Liam made a split-second decision. Without warning, he grabbed Lena's arm and bolted toward a narrow gap between the trees. Rex followed closely behind them, never leaving their side, his protective instincts kicking in. The footsteps behind them grew louder, and the sound of breathing, harsh, labored, seemed to echo in the quiet of the night. But Liam didn't dare look back. Every second counted. They had to outrun whatever or whoever was chasing them. "Keep running, Lena," Liam shouted, his voice cutting through the night air. "Don't stop." Lena's legs moved swiftly, but her small body struggled to keep up with Liam's long strides. He could feel her trembling, could hear the soft cries of fear she tried to stifle, but they couldn't stop. Not yet. They raced deeper into the forest, the crunch of dead leaves beneath their feet blending with the sound of panting from both Rex and Lena. The night seemed to press in on them, the forest closing around them as they ran. But then, out of nowhere, the sound of heavy footsteps behind them broke through the silence, too close, too fast. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he turned sharply, knowing they were almost out of time. The figures had caught up with them. The heavy footsteps grew louder, unmistakable now. They were close. Too close. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced over his shoulder. The figures, 3 of them, emerged from the shadows like predators closing in on their prey. They moved with a confidence that sent a chill through his spine. The last thing he needed was to be surrounded, and yet that's exactly what was happening. "Stay down, Lena," Liam commanded, his voice sharp and unwavering despite the fear bubbling inside him. He turned to face the approaching men, his rifle raised and ready. Rex growled beside him, a low, menacing sound that signaled he was prepared to attack. The men didn't stop. They were too determined, too dangerous. Their faces were hidden beneath masks, but their movements told Liam everything he needed to know. They were well-trained, professional, and they were after the girl. Liam's thoughts raced. He had a split second to act. He needed to make a choice. "Rex, stay with her," Liam barked, pointing toward the girl. The dog's head snapped to attention, and without a second thought, he bounded toward Lena, his body instinctively placing himself between the girl and the oncoming danger. Liam didn't waste another moment. He sprinted toward the men, closing the distance between them with the urgency of a man whose life depended on it. They were too close now, too dangerous. There would be no time for subtlety. He aimed his rifle at the first figure and fired without hesitation. The shot rang out through the night, a sharp crack that echoed through the trees. The man dropped to the ground with a grunt, clutching his side as blood seeped through the fabric of his jacket. But Liam didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. He turned to the second man, who had drawn a knife and was rushing toward him with terrifying speed. Liam raised his rifle, aiming for a clean shot, but the man was fast, too fast. He swung the knife in a vicious arc, aiming for Liam's torso. Liam dodged just in time, rolling to the side as the blade slashed through the air, narrowly missing him. The man's eyes were wild, filled with rage. He wasn't backing down. Liam didn't hesitate. With a swift movement, he brought his rifle up and used the butt of it to strike the man's wrist, knocking the knife from his hand. The force of the blow sent the man stumbling back, dazed, and Liam immediately moved in. He landed a solid punch to the man's jaw, sending him crashing to the ground, unconscious. 2 down. But there was still one more to deal with. Liam turned, and that's when he saw the last figure, the leader. He was standing a few feet away, watching the fight unfold with a cold, detached gaze. The man didn't flinch as his comrades fell. Instead, he stepped forward, his hand reaching for a gun holstered at his side. It was now or never. Liam sprinted toward the man, ignoring the pain in his legs as he closed the distance between them. The leader raised his weapon, but Liam was faster. With a roar, he tackled the man to the ground, knocking the gun from his grip in a violent collision. The two men struggled on the forest floor, fists flying, bodies twisting in a desperate fight for control. The leader's grip was strong, but Liam had the advantage of desperation. He needed to finish this. With a final, brutal punch to the man's throat, Liam heard the air rush from his lungs. The leader gasped, his body going limp beneath Liam's weight. Liam quickly rolled off him, breathing heavily, but his eyes never left the figure. He needed to be sure. The leader wasn't getting up. Liam stood, wiping the sweat from his brow. His breath was labored, his muscles aching, but there was no time to rest. He had to get Lena out of here. He turned toward her, his heart stopping when he saw her standing in the distance, trembling, her small face pale in the moonlight. Rex was beside her, watching Liam with a concerned expression. "We need to move, now," Liam urged, his voice tight as he walked back toward the girl. He reached for her hand, and she took it immediately, her fingers cold but strong. "We're safe," Liam said, his voice softer this time, trying to reassure her. "It's over." Lena didn't say anything. She just nodded, looking up at him with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. It was clear that the events of the past few hours had taken their toll on her. She had been through so much, far more than any child should ever experience. Liam glanced back at the bodies on the ground, making sure none of the men were moving. They were all down, incapacitated, or worse. But he knew this wasn't over. "Not yet. We need to get out of here," Liam said, his tone more urgent now. He had no idea who these men were, or why they were after Lena, but one thing was clear: they weren't the only threat in the woods, and there was no telling what else was waiting for them. Liam took a deep breath and started walking, leading Lena and Rex through the forest. The weight of the night's events pressed down on him, but he kept moving. For Lena, for Rex, for the mission he'd been given to protect. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the moonlight grew brighter, casting eerie shadows over the trees. But for the first time that night, Liam allowed himself a moment of hope. They had survived. But survival was just the beginning. The forest around them seemed endless, the trees towering like silent sentinels, blocking out any hope of light from the stars. Every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot, sent Liam's senses into overdrive. His eyes scanned their surroundings, and his hand never strayed far from his rifle. Though the immediate danger had passed, the feeling of being hunted lingered in the back of his mind. Lena clung to him, her small form shaking as she walked beside him, her wide eyes scanning the shadows as though she still couldn't quite believe she was safe. Her grip on his hand was tight, desperate, as if letting go would mean returning to the nightmare they had just escaped. Rex trotted beside them, his senses still alert, his ears flicking at every new sound. "We're almost there," Liam said quietly, but the words felt hollow. He wasn't entirely sure where there was. The forest felt like it was closing in on them, and though he'd led Lena away from immediate danger, he knew they weren't free yet. He pushed on, his mind constantly running through scenarios. What was after them? Who had sent those men? Why were they hunting a little girl in the middle of nowhere? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more pressing than the last. Lena, despite her fear, seemed to sense the urgency. Her steps grew steadier as they moved through the woods, but she didn't speak. She hadn't said much since they'd first met, and that silence now seemed to hang in the air, a heavy weight that Liam couldn't ignore. "Can you tell me what happened, Lena?" Liam asked, his voice softer this time. He couldn't push her too hard. He knew she was scared, but she might have information that could help him figure out what was going on. Lena stopped walking, her hand slipping from his. She stood still, staring at the ground. The shadows seemed to swallow her, making her look even smaller, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her tiny shoulders. I was with my mum," she whispered, her voice fragile, barely a breath. "And then they came. They took her away." Liam knelt down to her level, his heart breaking at her words. "Who took her? Do you know who they were?" Lena shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. No, I don't know. I just know they were bad. They hurt her, and then they left me, alone." The desperation in her voice cut through him like a knife. He couldn't imagine what she had been through. A mother, lost, left alone. His gaze turned to Rex, who had been quietly trotting behind them, his nose to the ground. The dog suddenly stopped and began to growl low in his throat, his body tense, as if he had sensed something that Liam couldn't yet detect. Liam's hand went instinctively to his rifle, his finger resting on the trigger guard. Rex barked once, a sharp, warning sound that echoed through the woods. "What is it, boy?" Liam murmured, scanning the trees around them. Something wasn't right. The forest had been silent for too long. Then, from the darkness ahead, a voice broke the silence. A voice that made Liam's blood run cold. "Liam Hart." The voice was low, smooth, and dripping with menace. "It's been a long time." Liam froze. He knew that voice. "Colonel Price," Liam muttered under his breath, his mind racing. The last person he wanted to encounter, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. Out of the shadows stepped a man Liam had hoped never to see again. Colonel Marcus Price, his former superior officer. The man who had once been a mentor to Liam, but who, as it turned out, had a much darker side. Price's cold eyes gleamed from beneath the shadow of his hood. He stood tall, his posture commanding, even though his uniform was slightly worn. The man had always been ruthless, and now, it seemed, he had come for Lena. Liam's heart thudded in his chest, his mind struggling to process the situation. Price had been a part of the military's covert operations. After Liam had left the force, he had heard whispers about Price's involvement with underground activities, smuggling, trafficking, and worse. Liam stood up, his hand never leaving the rifle. Rex growled at Price, his body low and ready to strike, but Liam held the dog back with a firm hand. "What do you want, Price?" Liam's voice was icy, though his mind raced. Price smiled, a twisted grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You, Liam, you've always been good at following orders, but this time, you don't get to choose." Liam's grip on his rifle tightened. "If you're here for her, you'll have to go through me first." Lena stepped closer to Liam, the fear in her eyes replaced by something else now, a quiet resolve. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. She was part of this, whether she liked it or not. Price chuckled darkly, his eyes flicking to Lena. "You think you can protect her? She's nothing more than a pawn, a tool, and you're just a relic of a war long gone. But, fine, if you want to play hero, we'll see how long you last." Liam felt a surge of anger course through him. There was no way in hell he was going to let this man take Lena. Not after everything she had been through. Not while he still had breath in his body. "You're not touching her," Liam spat, his eyes narrowing. Rex, sensing the rising tension, bared his teeth and growled louder. The standoff was palpable, and Liam knew it could erupt into chaos at any moment. Price smirked, taking a step forward. "We'll see, soldier, we'll see." And then, without another word, Price signaled to the men hidden in the shadows. The tension in the air was thick, heavy with the promise of violence. Liam's heart was pounding in his chest as he stood his ground, his rifle aimed squarely at Colonel Price. Behind him, Lena clung to his back, her small hands gripping his jacket as if the world were about to collapse around her. Rex, ever the protector, stood at Liam's side, his hackles raised, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Price, unfazed by the impending danger, motioned for his men to step forward. The darkness of the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees watching, silent witnesses to the unfolding confrontation. Liam's eyes flicked between Price and the men now emerging from the shadows, 4 of them in total. They were armed and well-trained, their faces obscured by masks, but Liam could see the coldness in their eyes. These were not ordinary thugs, these were professionals, mercenaries perhaps, and they were here for one reason, to take Lena. Liam tightened his grip on his rifle. He had one shot, one chance to get out of this alive, and to get Lena out alive. His mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation. He had no backup, no support. Just Rex, the girl, and himself. "Get behind me, Lena," he whispered, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. "Stay close. Don't move until I say." Lena nodded, her breath coming in shaky, frightened bursts. But she didn't protest. She trusted him. For reasons Liam couldn't understand, she had put her trust in him. Price took another step forward, his eyes glinting with amusement. "You really think you can stop me, Liam? After everything you've seen, everything you've been through, you're still trying to play the hero? How quaint! Liam's jaw clenched. He wasn't playing hero. This was personal. Price had crossed a line. And there was no going back now. I'm not letting you take her, Liam said, his voice cold and unwavering. Price's smile faltered for a split second before he regained his composure. Then you'll die trying. The sound of movement behind Price signaled that his men were getting into position. Liam's pulse quickened as he assessed his options. There were too many of them, and he was too exposed. The trees were sparse here, providing little cover. He couldn't stay in the open. Liam's eyes flicked to Rex. The dog was tense, ready for anything, but Liam needed to make the first move. He couldn't afford to wait. Now! Liam shouted, his voice cutting through the night. Before anyone could react, Liam dove to the left, rolling behind a nearby tree for cover. The sound of gunfire followed almost immediately, the sharp crack of bullets tearing through the air. He returned fire, his rifle booming as he aimed for the man closest to him. His shot was true, the mercenary falling to the ground with a shout of pain. "Get them!" Price barked. The remaining men advanced quickly, their movements coordinated. But Liam didn't hesitate. He was already on the move, rolling out from behind the tree and sprinting to the next piece of cover. Rex was by his side, darting between the trees, his movements fluid and precise as he lunged at the closest attacker. Liam fired again, his aim steady, but his mind was already calculating his next move. Price's men were skilled, but they weren't invincible. He just had to keep them at bay long enough to get Lena to safety. The battle was quick and brutal, the crack of gunfire filling the air as Liam exchanged shots with the remaining mercenaries. Rex was a blur of movement, knocking one man to the ground before sinking his teeth into another's arm. The dog was relentless, his loyalty unyielding. Liam, too, was a force of nature, his training taking over as he moved with precision. But despite his focus, he could feel the weight of each bullet fired, each step he took bringing them closer to danger. They couldn't afford to stand their ground for long. As Liam reloaded, a shot rang out from behind him. A scream of pain echoed in the night, and he spun around just in time to see Lena stumble, her hand clutching her side where blood seeped through her shirt. "No!" Liam shouted, his heart sinking as he rushed toward her. Rex was already there, growling fiercely at the mercenary who had taken the shot. The man was advancing on Lena, a malicious grin spreading across his face as he raised his weapon. Liam's instincts kicked in. He didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, tackling the mercenary to the ground, his rifle falling from his hands as he fought with the man. The sound of the struggle filled the air as they rolled through the dirt, limbs flailing. The mercenary was strong, but Liam was fueled by something far stronger. Desperation. He wouldn't let Lena die. With a final, powerful shove, Liam pinned the man to the ground, his fist landing squarely in the mercenary's face. The man grunted in pain, his weapon now out of reach. Liam kept him down, breathing heavily, his eyes wild as he checked on Lena. Lena was on the ground, clutching her side, her face pale as blood poured from the wound. Rex stood by her, whining in concern, but Liam couldn't focus on the dog right now. "Lena!" Liam cried, kneeling beside her. "Stay with me, okay? You're going to be all right. Just hang on." But the girl's eyes were fluttering, her breathing shallow. She couldn't have been more than a few moments from passing out. "Lena, please," Liam whispered, his voice breaking as he checked her injury. The bullet had pierced her side, and the bleeding was heavy. He had to stop the blood. Rex barked, drawing Liam's attention to the remaining mercenary, the leader Price, who had circled behind him, watching the scene unfold with cold eyes. Liam felt a surge of anger. He couldn't let Price win. Not after everything, but first, he had to get Lena out of here. He had to save her. Liam's heart raced as he knelt beside Lena, his hands shaking as he tried to apply pressure to the wound. The blood didn't stop. It soaked through his fingers, staining the ground beneath them. She was fading fast, and every second counted. He looked up at Rex, who was still standing guard, eyes locked on Price, but his loyalty remained with Lena. Liam's breath hitched as he scanned the surrounding area, but there was no escape. Not yet. Not with the girl bleeding out in front of him. "Hang on, Lena. Please, hang on," Liam muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena's eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus on Liam's face. Her lips parted, but no words came out, only a weak, pained breath. Her small hand weakly reached up, touching his arm with the last of her strength. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam's heart broke at her words. She was apologizing to him? She had nothing to apologize for. She hadn't asked for any of this. "No, Lena, you didn't do anything wrong," Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just hold on for me. I'm not leaving you. I won't let you go." But the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't stop the bleeding, not without help. And they were miles from the nearest medical aid, with no way to get Lena to safety in time. A sickening realization settled in. He had been trained to face war, to fight and survive against insurmountable odds. But this was different. This was a child, a life in his hands, and he was powerless to save it on his own. His hands were slick with her blood as he looked up again, and there, standing like a shadow in the distance, was Colonel Price, calm, composed, and watching the scene unfold. Price's lips curved into a sinister grin, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "You can't win, Hart," Price called out, his voice dripping with venom. "You're out of options. I know your every move. You know how this ends. Your loyalty is your weakness." Liam's jaw tightened. He refused to show any fear. He couldn't. Not now. Not when Lena needed him most. "I won't let you take her, Price. Not while I'm still breathing." Price raised his weapon, a sleek black pistol now aimed at Liam, his finger resting casually on the trigger. "You don't have a choice. You're outgunned, outmanned, and soon you'll be out of time. But don't worry, Hart. We'll take good care of her. She'll be just another piece in the game." Liam's mind raced. There had to be another way. He couldn't fight all of Price's men alone, but he had one thing the colonel didn't count on: his sheer will to survive. He turned his attention back to Lena. She was fading, but her hand still clung to his arm, as though holding on to the last thread of life. Her eyes locked onto his. "Please, don't let them. Take me," she whispered, barely audible, her words filled with fear. Liam swallowed hard, his throat tight. There was no way he could let this child fall into the hands of a monster like Price. Not now, not after everything they had been through. He couldn't afford to lose her. He wouldn't. "Lena, I promise you, I will keep you safe. I will not let him take you." He glanced at Rex, who stood still, watching Liam, waiting for a command. It was time. Time to make the hardest choice of his life. Liam took a deep breath, the weight of his decision settling over him. He couldn't fight all of Price's men alone, but he could create a distraction. A momentary advantage. Enough time to save Lena. With one last glance at Lena, he whispered, "Stay with me, stay strong." Liam stood up quickly, his rifle raised, and fired at the tree closest to Price's position. The sound of the bullet striking the bark rang out, and Liam darted to the side, disappearing into the trees. The mercenaries behind Price reacted instantly, their attention diverted for just a split second. Liam used the opportunity to circle back toward Lena, moving quickly through the dense forest, heart pounding in his chest. The shot had worked at least for now, but it wouldn't be enough for long. Price and his men would be on him in moments. The fight wasn't over yet. He reached Lena just as she was starting to slip away, her grip on his arm loosening. He knelt beside her again, his heart racing as he pressed his hands to her wound. "You're not leaving me, Lena," he said, his voice fierce. "Stay with me. We're getting out of here. Just hold on." But even as he said the words, he knew that time was running out. The sound of footsteps echoed through the trees again. Price and his men were closing in. He had no more time to waste. Liam made a snap decision. There was only one way out, one way to keep Lena alive. Without thinking, he hoisted her up into his arms, carrying her as carefully as he could. His breath was coming in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the forest, Rex close behind him, moving with purpose. Lena's weight was a burden, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting her to safety. Through the trees, Liam spotted an old abandoned cabin, his only hope. He had no idea if it would be safe, but it was the only option. His legs burned as he ran, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Behind him, he heard Price's voice once more, this time louder, more desperate. "Hart, don't think you can run forever. You can't escape me." Liam gritted his teeth and pushed harder, ignoring the pain. He couldn't let Lena fall into their hands. Not now. Not ever. Liam's breath came in ragged bursts as he ran through the darkened forest, the weight of Lena's limp form in his arms a constant reminder of the stakes. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to stop, to rest, but there was no time. Price and his men were closing in, and if Liam didn't make it to the cabin, they would have nowhere left to hide. Rex, ever loyal, kept pace beside him, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The dog's presence was a comfort, a reminder that, no matter what happened, they weren't alone in this fight. But the fear in Liam's heart didn't dissipate. Every step he took seemed to bring them closer to danger. The abandoned cabin came into view, its silhouette just barely visible against the dark sky. The building looked long forgotten, its windows boarded up, the roof sagging with age. It wasn't much, but it was better than running blind through the woods with no cover. Liam's legs burned, his exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him, but he pushed on. He couldn't let up now. Not when Lena was so close to death. "Almost there, kid," he muttered to Lena, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Her grip on his shirt had gone slack, and her breaths were shallow, the blood seeping from her wound slowing her down with every passing second. With one last surge of energy, Liam reached the door of the cabin and shoved it open, stumbling inside. The musty smell of decay and rot hit him immediately, but there was no time to worry about that. He set Lena down gently on the floor, her body weak and frail under his hands. "Stay with me, Lena, please," he pleaded, his voice thick with emotion. He quickly turned to Rex. "Guard her. Don't let anyone near." Rex didn't hesitate. He growled low, pacing in front of Lena protectively, his body taut with tension. Liam grabbed a broken chair and shoved it under the door handle, then turned to Lena, his hands shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding. He needed something, anything, that could help. There was no medical kit, no proper tools, just his hands, and the hope that he could stop the bleeding before it was too late. But then the door rattled. A sharp, loud knock echoed from outside. Liam's heart skipped a beat. "They're here," he whispered, his mind going into overdrive. He quickly grabbed his rifle from where he'd left it, pulling it into position. "Stay down, Lena," he whispered harshly, though she didn't respond. The door rattled again, this time with more force. Someone on the other side was trying to break it down. Liam crouched behind the small table, his rifle aimed at the door. His hands were steady, his mind calm, though his heart thundered in his chest. Rex, ever alert, growled again, standing in front of Lena as though he knew what was coming. Liam's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was a fight for everything Lena's life, his redemption, and the promise he made to protect her. The sound of boots stomping outside the cabin grew louder, their approach unmistakable. Price was here. Liam's finger hovered over the trigger. The door creaked as someone on the other side leaned against it, trying to break it open. There was only one thing left to do, one last stand to make. "I won't let you take her," Liam muttered under his breath, his voice rough with resolve. Just as the door splintered under the pressure, Liam made his move. He shot, first fast, decisive, his bullet slamming into the chest of the first man who emerged into the cabin. The man didn't even have time to react as he collapsed to the ground, his weapon falling beside him. The others rushed in, but they were too late to stop Liam. He fired again, taking down another attacker before they could fully enter the room. The sound of gunshots echoed through the cabin, deafening in the confined space. Price was the last to enter. He stood in the doorway, his figure looming like a dark shadow. His cold eyes locked with Liam's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "You think you can win, Hart?" Price sneered. "You're outnumbered, outgunned. You should have stayed away." But Liam wasn't afraid. Not anymore. This wasn't just about survival. This was about redemption. This was about protecting a life that had been torn apart, a life he had vowed to protect. "I'm not giving up," Liam said, his voice low and firm. Price raised his gun, aiming straight at Liam. The tension in the room was palpable, a moment of deadly silence before the storm. But then, as Price squeezed the trigger, a flash of movement broke the tension. Rex lunged at the colonel, knocking his arm off course just as the gunshot rang out. The bullet missed, hitting the wall behind them. In that instant, Liam saw his chance. He moved fast, charging at Price with all his strength. The two men collided. A brutal struggle ensued, fists flying and bodies crashing into the ground. The rifle skidded out of Price's hand as they rolled across the cabin floor. Liam's focus was razor-sharp. He had to end this now. He couldn't let Price leave with Lena, not after everything. With one final push, Liam slammed his fist into Price's face, knocking him out cold. The Colonel's body went limp, his eyes glazing over as Liam stood up, panting, covered in sweat and blood. Lena. He had to get to her. Liam turned quickly, rushing back to her side. She was still breathing, but barely. Her face was pale, her body cold to the touch. Lena, stay with me. You're going to be okay, he said desperately, his fingers searching for a pulse, his hands pressing down on her wound once more. But something had changed. Lena's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, her voice faint but filled with relief. Liam's heart soared. He wasn't too late. He had done it. "I'm here," Liam whispered back, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm here, and you're safe now." He held her close, feeling her warmth return to her body, knowing that they had made it. Against all odds, they had survived, and together they would rebuild.